Meet Codename Goose, your on-machine open-source AI agent, built to automate your tasks. Codename Goose is an intelligent and autonomous agent capable of handling complex tasks thanks to its core features. Connect with apps and tools you already use with extensions. Built on the Model Context Protocol, you can connect to extensions like GitHub, integrate JetBrains IDEs, access Google Drive, or build your own custom integrations for Goose. For a curated list of extensions, visit our docs. With a wide range of compatible large language model providers, you can choose and integrate your preferred model. You can also run Goose as a desktop app or through the command line interface using the same configurations across both. You can think of Goose as an assistant, ready to take your instructions and do the work for you. Able to handle a wide range of tasks across various engineering domains. Here are examples of tasks Goose has helped people with already. Goose has helped dive into a new project in an unfamiliar coding language, conduct code migrations such as Ember to React or Ruby to Kotlin, increase code coverage, and even generate unit tests for a feature, and much more. To get started using Goose right away, check out our quick start and be the first to know about upcoming features by joining.
Hey y'all, that was so weird. The audio randomly stopped. I don't know what just happened, but that's okay. Happy Tuesday to everybody, and I hope that you're doing well. I'm super excited because for two reasons. One, because we're going to talk to Kevin from OpenAI today, and two, because we're having a Goose Boston meetup. This is like our first Goose meetup and the first meetup that I ever hosted. I guess I've technically hosted meetups before, but not on this scale. So I'm pretty excited about that. If you're in the Boston area, hit me up and I'll invite you or I'll send you the link to join. All right, so for folks who've never tuned in before, welcome to Goosing Around. This is a live stream where we kind of play around with Goose and talk to external guests about how their tools integrate with ours. Today, as I mentioned, we're chatting with Kevin Whinnery, who's a developer experience engineer at OpenAI, and we're talking about how developer experience is evolving in the AI world. We're also talking about like what it means to design for AI agents, the challenges of AI tooling, and of course, run a Goose demo using different OpenAI models. We're going to talk a lot about what OpenAI model works best for different tasks. Like that's been something I've been really curious about. I think we've determined as a team that like Claude Sonnet 3.5 works really well and GPT-4 works 4.0 works really well with Goose, but I'm just curious about like different types of tasks, writing, development, all that. But enough talking. I want to say hi to the chat. Hey, to Adewale, thanks for tuning in. And Kevin, I usually start off with an icebreaker that you weren't even ready for.
This is true. This is brand. This will be a genuine reaction because I was not ready for the icebreaker. Let's do this.
Let's do it. And I just come up with it like randomly in my head. Like it's just a random question. So also hi Max Honk, I guess. My question is, do you skip commercials for like for streaming services? Would you rather pay for a service more money so you could skip all the commercials, or you like I really don't care?
I think I mostly land on the don't care, but like I feel like I do both. Like I pay for like streaming services, and then I also see ads like on Hulu. I feel like I pay for that, yet also get ads. So I think like I have to go to the next level of paying. But
Yeah.
yeah, so somehow I think I managed to do both. I both pay and view ads in the streaming
Okay.
services.
And it doesn't really bother you. You just end up paying
Yeah,
that.
it's okay. Well, I feel like I need to pay something, at least for the Hulu one. I need to like pay something. Like it gets like, bundled into the Disney Plus, I think.
I
But I think I'm willing to deal with it because like yeah, for interior Chinatown and the bear and stuff like that, you gotta do what you gotta do.
The bear, yes.
Yeah.
And Max said he would rather skip, but he's broke. Yeah, for me, okay, like I kind of don't care just because I'm like during a commercial, like I'm usually like multitasking. So I'm like during a commercial, I could go back to focusing on coding or cooking or whatever it is I was doing. But my little sister, she's Gen Z. I feel like Gen Z people hate commercials. She will go broke just paying like for all her streaming services to not see a commercial. But yeah,
Yeah, it's true. Like if I need to like threaten the teenage children with something, it's just like you're going to talk to the man who pays for Spotify Premium, like with that tone, and they're just like, okay, fine. Like I'll give you
like I won't do it anymore. I have one last icebreaker, but this one's more related to our topic. I think when we were talking backstage and even when we were prepping for this live stream, you had mentioned like that you maintain like Docusaurus and stuff like that for OpenAI and different documentation. Moses, by the way, said we skip and enjoy some. But I was curious, do you use AI ever to help you with developing documentation? I say this because I do. And I was at a conference and people were like listening to me and they're like, wow, Rizzo's saying such amazing stuff. And then someone asked me that. And as soon as I said yes, everyone was like, like it was kind of like an audible gasp, like the you need to leave type of vibe. And I was like, oh, is that wrong? So I'm just curious, do you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I feel like I don't think I could keep up with the work that we have to do at OpenAI because like there's something shipping all the time. Like there's
Right.
always new like bits and bobs coming out through the API or like content that we need to generate. So like I don't think I actually could have done this job at this company like with the technology of 5 years ago. Like
Yeah.
our models are actually like a non-optional part of my workflow to like generate code. We'll get into it in the demo here in a little bit to actually just show how I do that. But definitely do use AI all the time to generate code. And I don't know. I don't think it'll be shocking. My suspicion is like in the next 2 years, it'll be rarer to find a developer that doesn't use AI than one who does. Yeah, exactly. Like I think it'll flip the other way.
Thank you. I will show this video when people ask me that. If anyone asks me in the future, I'm like, look, Kevin has like years of experience and he does. Because like you're saying, development moves so quickly. And then like for me to keep up with whatever they're coding and they're building out, like sometimes I use AI to be like, hey, how does this feature work, et cetera, et cetera. And like you said, we'll see more of how it works for you. All right, I have a few. So for folks who are wondering like what to expect in this conversation, I have a few questions for Kevin, then we'll jump into a demo that he has, and I'll open the floor for questions from you all. I will love for you all to like just interact. I like feed off of audience interaction. So the more you interact, the better this live stream is going to be. And just pointing out that Max said it's not a problem with block play, but he has 2 kids. So if you know, you know. I don't know. I only have one and it's already a struggle. All right, Kevin. So like we were talking about, you've had like a pretty colorful career in DevRel and developer experience. We were talking about this backstage. Like you were head of DevRel at Dino. I know you did a lot of DevRel at Twilio before joining OpenAI as a developer experience engineer. I'm curious, what was the transition like for you? Did you have to think about developer experience differently when you're working on an AI tool versus like just a runtime like Dino or like, I don't know, just curious.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, in terms of transitioning, Dino was my last stop before OpenAI was a much smaller company, so like there's fewer moving parts to anything that the company would do at any given time. Where OpenAI is not huge, but it is definitely quite a bit larger, and sort of the scale of the problems that we have to deal with any given day are fairly large. Like there's weird conversations that happen sometimes where it's like, well, we're building this new giant data center thing. Should we build it to survive one nuclear strike or two? And it's like, how is this like a topic of conversation right now? Like it's a, there's like the sorts of problems that you talk about are of a different nature. So like with the API documentation specifically, or like the SDKs that we work on, we know like anything you do in those resources is going to be consumed pretty quickly by like millions of developers that are using these tools every day. So thinking at scale becomes really important. And like as we were kind of talking about before we started, just like the speed that the organization moves requires that we think differently about how we do this work. So like it's actually pushing me a lot harder than I've been pushed in a very long time to think like, okay, a lot of the playbook that I've learned over the years like is just not going to work anymore. Like the way I did docs at Twilio is not going to work to do docs at OpenAI. So like we need to kind of develop a new set of tools and processes and like ways of thinking about doing this work to hope to kind of keep up and like do this at a better level than we have in the past.
Wow. I love that it's challenging you, even though you've had, like, I don't know. I'm always like, I looked at your LinkedIn, you had like 9 years of experience at Twilio. And then like, I love that it's still challenging you to think and work in different ways. I like jobs like that, where I'm like, okay, sometimes I leave a job because I'm like, I just want to refresh my brain and figure out how to think a little bit differently. Yeah, we will be talking about Goose. I just
Oh, we got you.
Yeah, we got you. We're gonna do a demo. So, talking about OpenAI and all of that, right? One of the things that I mentioned earlier is I'm trying to figure out like what LLMs should I use to plug into Goose to get the right experience. But I don't really know. I know OpenAI has posted stuff about this, but I haven't done enough research to understand like why there's so many different models and families of it. Like, what's the strategy? Which tools excel at what? And why are there like minis?
Yeah. So we actually don't love that there's all these models either necessarily. Like we know that it kind of introduces some complexity to have like all these different models with all these different sort of sets of capabilities associated with them. We hope that kind of in the future, kind of all the models will sort of converge into one that will have like support a range of capabilities, a range of modalities, a range of like different ways of processing input. Like you'll be able to support reasoning or not, or support this type of input or not. So we imagine that there's going to be some convergence in that in the future, but in the here and now, so the kind of major model families we have are either like we have this set of reasoning models, or we have like our GPT models, and there's kind of some differences in how they were trained. But as a practical matter, the GPT models tend to be a little bit faster, a little bit lower latency, and pretty good at performing tasks that you can describe in some level of detail. So if you can say, I want you to specifically do this under these conditions, the GPT models tend to do a really good job of that and are reasonably cost efficient for those types of tasks. But our reasoning models like O1 or O3 Mini, they actually, so a reasoning model, what it will do is like before it actually renders a response to a prompt, it'll generate reasoning tokens, which is like an internal chain of thought, which is pretty wild to see. Like if you have kind of seen these reasoning tokens be generated, it actually mirrors a lot of like what your brain does. Like when you're processing a question and understanding what to do, it's like, well, they probably mean this. They're asking the question with this context. Probably this is what they want out of a response. And then, after generating those reasoning tokens, they use that as part of the context that the model then uses to generate a response to the prompt. The sort of cost of that, though, is that it usually takes a little bit longer to generate the reasoning tokens, and there's more tokens, so it tends to be like a little more expensive on the API side. So reasoning models we typically see used for like more ambiguous problems where like it's like if you have a senior engineer, you might, or a senior designer, you, instead of like telling them what to do, you would pose a problem for them and say like, this is like the business outcome I want to drive. Figure out how to do it. I trust you to kind of fill in the gaps to understand like how to get that job done. Working with a reasoning model is very similar. So if you can provide like kind of specifications of what success looks like, then usually you'll get something out the other end that looks pretty close to what those specifications were. So so a lot of times you'll see like a reasoning model, like an O1 or an O3 mini used as like the brain of an application, where like GPT 4.0 or 4.0 mini are used to kind of be the worker bees of the overall solution. So right now the models kind of work together in that way. But I think in the future, we'll kind of have like one sort of interface that will be able to kind of conditionally do those things depending on what's appropriate.
That was really insightful for me. First off, I didn't know they were called reasoning tokens. I have like clicked that reasoning button before, or deep reasoning, or used O3 and stuff like that. And then I see it like thinking in the background where it's like users think wonders about this. And I'm like, what's the point of this? So now like that kind of gave me some more context. Okay, so I know I have more questions for you, but I'm thinking since I spoke so much, I talk a lot, and we're at the 60-minute mark, maybe we can do the demo and then we'll circle back to some questions. That way we give people what they want. Feeling good?
Yeah, right on. Let's do it.
Cool.
All right. So I actually recently kind of started messing around with Goose, and what I thought would be interesting is to kind of use it in the context of how I use OpenAI models like in my daily work. And here, I'm actually going to move the browser over here so I can still see chat in case folks have questions. But let me pull up the editor here. So I use Cursor a lot these days. It's in terms of like an AI enabled IDE. It's still my favorite. Like the tab mode tends to, guess what I want to do pretty often. So I spend quite a bit of time in Cursor, but I actually don't love I think like the chat and the agent functionality of it is like fine, but unremarkable. Well, one thing I thought Goose has been pretty cool, like in my testing of it, is like providing sort of the more chat-like interface that is that I can put into my development workflow, like outside the context of actually editing files. And the secret sauce for that, which Goose users will know, is like the Goose hints file, which you can kind of sprinkle throughout the project. And this I have found really cool because it can kind of when you're crafting a prompt for an LLM, you can often do, few shot learning where you provide some examples of like, this is approximately the output that I want. And like, here's some context information that is going to be, useful to generate a result that is close to the shape that I want. And being able to have like multiple of these like Goose hints files kind of around the repo lets you kind of create sessions that will like suck in that context and like actually have like a much better shot of giving you exactly what you want the first time around. So like, I'm just going to like, fire up a Goose session here in the home directory of this folder. And as I mentioned before, like I have to use AI to like get my work done. Like if I didn't use AI, I wouldn't be able to, document all of our API surfaces and like keep our SDKs in any kind of semblance of working order. So the folder that I'm in here is a copy of like kind of the OpenAPI specification for the OpenAI REST API and like our real-time API and stuff like that as well. And this folder of stuff, like we have kind of a custom build process around, and it generates the OpenAPI spec, which is actually public. Like you can find that on GitHub. But like there's some custom build stuff in here, like how we include different parts of, like references to other parts of the specification isn't exactly, standard. Like this ref property, for instance, like doesn't exist in the OpenAPI spec. So like being able to author the specification in multiple files is something that's kind of special to this repo. So generating content for like this type of project can be challenging because like the model probably doesn't know all this silly little conventions that exist within this project specifically. So what I'm able to do is like in this Goose hints file, say like, okay, this is an OpenAPI schema, and our schema objects look like this, and they kind of have these properties. And then our routes objects look like this, and they have these properties. So, in our specification here, all the different routes that are supported in the REST API are in these files. And we have this sort of custom convention of like, we have this double underscore in the URL. Everywhere there's supposed to be a slash in the URL. And then if there's like a path parameter, we include those in curly braces. And so like this type of information we can sort of capture in Goose hints as like sort of a cheat for like, this is how these files work. And what I've been able to do with our models, and also through Goose, which has been nice, because like I usually actually have to have custom scripts to do this stuff otherwise, is we can have this information when I ask Goose to do stuff. So like in the prompt, I can say like, hey, we just released a new endpoint for V1 responses. Oh, by the way, the responses API is just launched last week. It's kind of a nice simplified interface, like chat completions, sort of the successor for chat completions. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. But I can say we, release this for, response ID / I don't know, like image inputs, say. So like, this is not a URL that exists, but imagine that there was a URL where I wanted to get all the image inputs that were used to like create a specific response. So can you generate an endpoint definition for me? And so I'll kind of send that off to Goose, and I have like OpenAI and O3 Mini selected as my model here. And for this type of work, I typically do reach for O3 Mini first, because this is a little like loosely specified, and I benefit from having like a little bit of extra intelligence to, understand what I mean in addition to like what I say. So it looks like, we had a decent, first attempt here. Actually, it generated like a post request, which is fine, but it's not actually what I wanted. I probably I wanted to actually do a get. But like what it's guessed here is actually pretty smart, and it's starting to do the types of things that I would have to otherwise do manually. So it's got like the path parameters, and then it's also specified, this, schema for like inputs to this endpoint in YAML, mostly conforming to the, to the format I want. One thing it actually did do, because I provided that example in the, Goose hints, is it included this like fully custom extension to OpenAPI, which we have in like our spec, because if you go to the API reference for OpenAI, all of our endpoints have like code examples configured for them, and those are actually embedded in the spec, like with this like custom extension property. And because I provided an example, it has actually correctly created like what is probably close to like the sort of code that I would need to include. And actually, like this is how, like in a curl request, if I was doing a file upload, this is kind of how it would work. So this is actually pretty smart. So bonus points here for giving me the actual code. But one thing I've noted is like, if I just ask like a little more forcefully, can you go ahead and create this?
You got to apply pressure with Goose. Yeah.
What's that?
No, I was saying you gotta, like you said, you wanted to ask more forcefully. I'm like, yeah, you gotta apply pressure with Goose and other AI tools sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you have to be a little explicit. Like, I think there's a way with Goose to say like, to have it be a little bit more, YOLO mode, where it'll actually create files a little more aggressively. So it does look like it did the thing though. So that's great. So it actually did go through and create the file with the thing that I wanted. So if I go to, what is it? Responses, image inputs, it has created the file with the stuff that I wanted, which is pretty great. So Yeah, I mean that's so like this type of stuff I do all the time. Like I use our models to generate this type of stuff. Like a lot of times I'll have like very loose inputs like from the engineering organization about like, well, this is what's in the model or what's going to be in the API endpoint. Here's like a Notion doc and like some Python code which theoretically implements this API. I can just kind of shove that into the model and say like, can you generate a specification for it? And it'll get pretty close. So I definitely recommend like if you do this type of work, starting with some model generated output and some like good examples of about the output that you expect can be a pretty big unlock. And yeah, I haven't been using Goose for that long, but like I do think like the special sauce is like, okay, cool. Like I can stuff my context with these hints files. And depending on where I start my session, it'll actually kind of have a different set of reference points that it can use for a specific kind of like workflow. So like I could see me having like a Goose hints in my paths folder, say, and then in the components folder, and then at various points, like kind of depending on the type of thing I am likely to want to do. And that would actually, for me, replace like a lot of custom scripts that I've written that, use the LLM to do these specific things. But I find like this prompting format to be a little more like natural, and it's kind of doing the thing that I want without very much intervention, and is slightly more flexible.
I love that you were able to, first off, that you were able to like ramp up so quickly, because you only started using Goose like yesterday, right? Or
Yeah, like it's been in the last couple of days, like when I knew we were gonna hang out. So I, have over like the last, let's call it week or so, like started to tinker around with it. But yeah, like I think it slots in an interesting spot between like a Claude code or like maybe the cursor agent sort of interface. But yeah, I think like the CLI as a form factor makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I do really love what's happening with the Goose hints. Yeah, no, I'm a fan, and was able to like, with not being an expert, like get up to speed pretty quickly. And the fact that the prompt is a bird, like I appreciate the little detail.
wait a minute, why didn't I notice that? Oh no.
It's a goose. I'm pretty sure it's a goose. Like that's
probably be
pretty
like
nice.
looking it down. I was like, why do they got a random 0 in parentheses? It's a goose, it's a bird. Oh my god, that's so cute. I had no clue. I did not notice that. We had a couple of comments. They're just on the fact that you were using Goose with cursor. But I've done that before, and I think that's the beauty of some of these AI tools where you can kind of combine them. I don't see why I need to limit myself to one. I combine them for whatever I think their strength might be. I'm happy, like y'all, if you have any questions or thoughts or things you want to ask Kevin as well. But I have things as well to mention. First off, it was cool to see your workflow, because that's something you would do in like your day to day, right? Even though Goose did instead of putting a post, did a post. Like I think there's either other ways to get around that too, where you can put it into like approve mode.
Yeah, I fully did not specify that too. Like I just said, like we have a new endpoint, and it made a very reasonable guess. So.
Yeah, it did its best. One of the questions I had for you was like, as AI. So I've been reading about like some people coming up with blog posts, like Matt Billman from Netlify, and he's talking about like agent experience. So I know you've been really focused more on developer experience in your career journey, and I'm curious if like as AI tools become more agentic, where agents themselves are interacting with software instead of humans, how if have you started thinking about agent experience instead, or is that something where you're like, that's not really a factor for me?
Yeah, I mean, sort of starting in the smaller world of like my specific role is to enable people to adopt like the OpenAI API and do whatever is required to like make that happen in a useful way. So I think like what is changing, and this is again why like kind of the playbooks of the past are in some respects like not all that useful, is like a lot of code is going to be written by not humans. Like a lot of like learning is going to be done by machines instead of by people sitting down, looking at a screen, reading documentation, like trying to figure out how your thing works. So for us, I think like we're starting to figure out better ways to like enable AI tools to consume the content that we produce. Like definitely we need to have some like human readable content that's still reasonable, but it's a big job to do this properly. Like, and we still haven't, cracked this code even for like making sure ChatGPT say like always generates like good OpenAI like code snippets. There's like stuff around like how do we do that properly? But there's some emerging standards that might be end up being useful. Like there's the LLMs.txt sort of convention where you can provide plain text versions of documentation that are easy to load into LLMs as context. There's like Goose of course supports MCP as like a way of getting new types of tools and content like into models, and that's the thing we're looking at as well about are there ways that we can support those types of things. So I think I think the place where I am starting on a developer experience side is like we have content today that's pretty human centric. We need to get it to a place where it's very, very easy for machines to consume it. Because again, I think like a lot of integration code isn't going to be written by humans like in the next like 6 to 18 months.
Ooh, interesting prediction. But yeah, I'm really curious. I'm like so curious to see what the future will look like when of how we're going to start structuring input for agents and AI so that it'll be able to give us like more refined results. I'm just going to answer a couple questions in the chat. Moses says, first time hearing about Goose. Is this a subsidiary of OpenAI or an entirely different company? So just to quickly answer, I don't know if Kevin wants to add on. Maybe you missed the beginning. Goose is an open source AI agent. It's local to your machine, and it's a product that came out of Block. We have an open source like initiative, and that's one of our tools that came out of it. And we integrate with a lot of different tools. So we integrate with like Claude and like Anthropic, OpenAI's LLMs and stuff like that. You can basically bring the LLMs that you prefer to work with. And so we're just trying out and exploring what does Goose look like, or how do we work with Goose and OpenAI's tooling. And then Max had a question for you. Kevin, are there workflows where you would use Goose over other tools now that you played with it? I love that question.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for my flow, like what I've been doing has almost been entirely based in Cursor. Like for a lot of like my day-to-day development stuff, I think like where I could see this tool, where I like this tool already a little better is where in the cases where I'm in chat and I have like sort of a broader like generation request where before, like I kind of mentioned it while I was demoing, but where before I would have like written a script that hit the OpenAI API to do a specific type of generation. I could see instead of doing that, investing in some of these Goose hints files to create like context and examples, and then replacing like basically like the Command L in Cursor, like to like the freeform chat. I feel like the Goose experience with these hints files is actually kind of a superior approach to that, because a lot of times that's usually the starting point I want is like, here's some context, here's some examples of the thing I want to do, and then I want to interact with the LLM and kind of Goose it until it, does the thing that I want it to do. So I could see like, this being a really nice place to slot in place of like chat, say.
Cool. I love that. And it has a lot of agents do have like memory capabilities and stuff like that. So I do think those parts are cool as well. Ian has an off-topic question. Is that a curling brush against the wall? And which games are on your arcade machine?
Yeah, it is a curling brush against the wall. I'm on a curling team. So I'm based in like just outside Minneapolis in Minnesota. So I'm on a curling team known as the Ice Road Chuckers. And we actually just wrapped up the season. We lost a heartbreaker to Fruit of the Broom the other day, which was tough. But curling, yeah, if you're not familiar, you slide a rock. It's a little bit like horseshoes or shuffleboard, and you try to get a rock like close to a target on a sheet of ice. And the broom lets you like sort of sweep in front of the rock to like what you're doing is you're actually melting the ice in front of the rock to make the rock either go further or to curve or curl less. So that is a curling broom back there. And the arcade machine is actually the arcade machine we made for Twilio Quest. So I made an educational game while I was at Twilio called Twilio Quest. And it was like a top-down, like Zelda style, like 16-bit RPG game. And a few times we actually brought that cabinet out to like events like PyCon or like our own conference at Twilio, and it ran Twilio Quest. So like that's why it's got like a keyboard and like a trackball on it, is you could actually play Twilio Quest and like write Twilio code on that cabinet. But the team was nice enough to give me the cabinet several years back. So yes.
And that's cool about the Twilio Quest thing. And then someone was asking about like experiences with real cases or use cases of agents, I think they're trying to say. I would love to share, and I don't know if you have any as well that you want to
Yeah,
share.
you go ahead. Love to hear you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple of especially with Goose, and like I don't know if you pronounce it Manus or Meanus or whatever, but people are using agents a lot for like automation, and not just like developers. Like sometimes people may use, like I've seen like legal teams basically, like instead of having to like read through a whole bunch of legal documentation, especially when there's like an updated version of that form, they might say like, hey, can you like tell me the differences between this documentation or this legal doc and that legal doc, and then Goose would tell them. Or I've seen people say, okay, can you give me like some analysis on some of the like severities that we've been having, or some of the things that have popped up in like pager duty, or like different like on-call tooling that people have used. So that's different areas that you can use different agents in. And then for coding as well, I kind of just, I don't know if y'all have heard of vibe coding, just for fun. Sometimes I'm like, I have an idea, I just want to like see where the AI agent will take me, and it's just more for like a personal use case, or sometimes if I need to like spin up a demo really, really fast for work. But Kevin, I'll let you go.
Yeah, you definitely covered some of the useful ones. Like I've been pretty impressed with like Lovable and Vercel, like V0 as like app builders that like do surprisingly good work and like get you pretty far, like when you're in the prototyping phase, or like if you need to build something that's like more of an internal tool. Those have been really impressive. Some of the other like impressive like agent type stuff I've seen has been in the coding space. Like so there's autonomous coding agents of various flavors that will like send pull requests to your repo that do a specific task. So like I think that's where we're seeing like a lot of the like very practical applications today. But I think like in other domains, we're starting to see it too. Like one of my favorite like applications of OpenAI models is Chat PRD, which is a tool for like, oh yeah, okay, so you are familiar. You are familiar.
I've seen someone talking about it. Maybe Claire Vaux.
Yeah, Claire from Launch Darkly is like, it's kind of her side hustle, and I think it is one of the best like sort of examples of like you have this domain expertise, like you kind of understand how this customer or how this type of knowledge worker needs to go about their business, and you can encode those best practices like into a set of prompt, like a way to like build prompts and build workflows around LLMs that will sort of give you the benefit of that experience when you create that type of work product. And I don't know, maybe agentic is maybe not the right like way to describe it, because it is like mostly a transactional interface right now. But like you could see like products like that evolving, where for any type of knowledge worker, you can sort of outsource a task and say like, here's some very high level guidance of the thing I want to do, go. And I think like those types of things where like we take the work of knowledge workers, delegate those things to agents that have been sort of optimized to be really good at that type of work, and then like they give us a work product back at some point in the future. I think like that is the very near term type of agent that's going to be like pretty effective. I think like further down the road is like, is there going to be an AI agent that can book me a flight? I don't know that I would like necessarily give an AI like $5,000 to like book me on Delta.
A little
But
nerve-wracking.
yeah, but like I would definitely like trust an agent to be like, all right, send me a pull request to do this thing that I'm going to review, or like create a spreadsheet that does a budget with like these parameters. Like an agent is absolutely able to go off and do that and like do some independent research and like generate something that is super useful. So I think like that is not science fiction at all. That's just kind of where we are. And I think we're going to see like more of those types of things in the very near future.
I think so too. I think it's something that like could work alongside you. I the flight idea sounds cool, but also like you said, a little bit scary. Like I would want some protections in between. Maybe it's like ask me first, like, hey, I found some flights for you, and then I'll book. All right.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. I think like we just haven't quite like cracked the code on that
How
form
it
factor in UX yet.
DB Daryl is asking, is Ada or Claude Code part of your workflow with Goose? I'm asking as a person who lives in the CLI. For me, if I do use Goose, I don't live in the CLI, but if I do use Goose in the CLI, I often have been opening up Cursor, but I haven't used like Ada or Claude Code. Curious for you. And you're OpenAI person, so yeah.
Yeah, I haven't used those tools like specifically, but like within the CLI, something like a Goose is helpful. Like I also like try to be a team player and use a lot of the stuff that is in like the ChatGPT like desktop app, say. So I've built some workflows around that. But again, like most often, like I interact with our models through tools like a Goose, like a Cursor, like tools that are building on top of our models. So I kind of know what they can do. I know like when I would use one model over the other. But a lot of like these different UIs and form factors and like layers on top of the models kind of provide different sets of advantages. So I think like the CLI to me feels like the most natural place to do more of like I am going to describe to the model what I want done and like kind of go that route versus like something in the IDE. Like I really do just want kind of code complete, turned up to 11. And like the cursor tab is the best example of that I've seen. Like the cursor tab is pretty magical. Like I know people are really excited about Windsurf too, and I want to check it out as well. But I've found those types of tools to be super useful in that way. But like, yeah, I've been basically using Cursor's like chat interface as a CLI, but like I think for like the more sort of high level agent-y things, the CLI is the better form factor.
Awesome. Yeah. I've been wanting to, I downloaded Windsurf. I just didn't try it out. There's so many different AI tools to just keep up with. Oh wait, I'm gonna ask you maybe one last question as we're nearing the end. You kind of got into a lot of the questions that I had listed before of like what's overhyped versus realistic. You kind of said like right now what's realistic is like more of like the coding task rather than like maybe book us a flight. But I'm actually curious too, right? Like everyone's building AI agents right now, and obviously some will fade out, unfortunately. That's just the way tech is. I'm curious, like, what do you think are the key characteristics of AI agents that will basically stand the test of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the one that's definitely top of mind is the types of agents that start to like approximate what a knowledge worker does. So like whether it's an accountant or a developer or a product leader, I think those types of agents where they can be sort of assigned tasks that are like knowledge work shaped and can pretty independently come back with a work product that is similar to what a human could produce. Like those types of agents I think are going to be like the first wave of like immediately useful agents, and I think we already have them. Like we're already in a place where those agents are already doing work. So yeah, those are the ones I'm bullish on, is like knowledge workers specifically. I think the next phase that I'm pretty excited about is like what happens when agents start interacting with one another directly. Like how can we sort of facilitate work that happens between specialist agents without intervention? And I think that's kind of an unexplored frontier right now, and probably will require a little bit of coordination around like, well, how do these systems talk to each other? How do we discover what they can do? And I don't know that we have all the tools yet to make that real. But if you imagine that like a knowledge worker working as sort of a co-pilot to a human is already a really great use case, like what happens when you create a team of them? Like how much faster can they go? What else can they could produce?
To note, someone did create a team of geese or whatever. They like
A
had
flock of geese, perhaps?
yeah, a flock
Yeah.
of geese. And they connected them all together. There is one question in the audience that I do think is a good question, because I think I kind of brushed over it a little bit. I didn't even I got so caught up in this conversation, I didn't give you guys the little quiz that I usually do. So y'all are free from that. But DB Darrell saying, where do you see GPT 4.5 and all 3 mini high best used in a development workflow?
Yeah, I mean, I think for like generally speaking, when you have O3 mini high, like what you're hoping is for like some analysis to improve the result of the prompt that you put in. So it's usually for the types of prompts where like you might not you want to provide a set of goals and like some specifications of like, this is roughly what I want you to do, but I don't really know exactly how to do it, and I need you to fill in the gaps of my own knowledge. So for higher level tasks, like things where you're like, I kind of don't know what I don't know, O3 Mini with high juice is usually going to be a good place to start, because it will do a little bit of reasoning around like, all right, probably this is what you mean, probably this is what is appropriate in this context, and it'll be able to give you a best effort. Where like all the GPT models, 4.5 among them, will do better when like the prompt is fairly explicit, and like it's more about like synthesizing content that we know to exist elsewhere in the world, where it's like, well, how do I write write a, an async loop in JavaScript that calls the fetch API, for every item in an array? Like GPT 4.5 is very, capable of doing that. 4.0 capable of doing that as well. So like when you think that your prompt is like pretty reasonably available, like within the corpus of training data that most LLMs have access to, then you're probably going to want to go that route. And because like GPT 4.5 specifically is the chunkiest like model that we've created so far in terms of like its overall training data set, it's gotten better at like writing, just because it's like sampled a lot of different it's sampled so much text, it can synthesize words in like more interesting ways than it might before. So yeah, like I think those are kind of in broad strokes like when you might use it. If you want like syntax guidance, a GPT model is probably what you want to use versus like a reasoning model.
Okay, so like my takeaway is GPT 4.5 for writing, GPT 4.0 when you have a specific task, and like the O3 for like basically development oriented task. Okay, so thank you so much for like sharing your insights, Kevin. Like for me, this is really interesting. Like I'm really like I don't know, I'm interested in like the direction of where AI is going and any spicy takes, and you gave that to me. So I really appreciate it. DB Darrell also said like that's how he's been using it. Thanks for letting him know that he was on the right track. Are there any last things you want to like share with the audience, maybe about like I know you had the reasoning API or response API?
Responses API, yeah. So if you just go out to the like platform.openai.com, you'll see like in our new quick start docs, like there's it kind of take you through using this new form of the API. One thing, like if I were to plug a specific thing that you can do in responses, is there's a built-in web search tool now where you can enable web search like for a completion request, so that like in a couple lines of code, like you can, do inference with like the latest like data on the web. So that's been super useful. So that in conjunction with like structured outputs, where you can specify like JSON data format for like the data that you get back from the API, basically turns the entire internet into a read API that you can structure any way you want. So definitely check out like the web search tool through responses if you haven't already.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming by. And like you said, check out the stuff that's happening in OpenAI. I feel like learning about whatever's going on in OpenAI can also help you to learn how to use Goose better. If this was your first time even learning about Goose, feel free to join our Discord. I'll play a video at the end that I'll show you how to join our Discord and just other information that we have coming up. And also, we do have the Goose Boston meetup coming up as well. So just want to invite you all to attend that or be on the lookout for that. And we always have live streams every Tuesday and Friday. That's all I have. That's it, y'all. Have a great Tuesday. Bye.
Is your website truly accessible? Let's plug and play with Goose to find out. Let's provide Goose with the command it needs to connect to the Puppeteer MCP server. Hey Goose, can you check if my website is accessible? Let's focus on things like keyboard navigation, color contrast analysis, screen reader compatibility, and ARIA and semantic HTML validations. Go Goose! Go Goose! Goose successfully navigated to my site, took screenshots to perform evaluations on, and performed numerous tests, along with a detailed report with, might I add, code fixes. To get started, visit block.github.io/Goose.